Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel H&E Life, and I'm Dr. Cindy Wong. Today I want to tell everyone about my path into medicine and how I eventually settled on pathology as a subspecialty of medicine. Okay, so the story basically all starts right before college. In high school, I was really good at my science courses and my math courses. Especially, I really enjoy biology and chemistry. And I really hated any of my writing or English classes, and social studies classes were whatever. So based on those, I decided that I would probably end up going into either medical school or do a PhD in something sciencey. And I thought that, well, why not do engineering? That way, in case worst comes to worst, I will still be able to be an engineer and do something sciencey and still make a decent living. So I went to Cornell being a biological engineering major. In retrospect, I have to say that might not have been the best idea. What I mean by this is engineering is stereotypically more challenging than, say, like the basic sciences. Even though I was a good student, I ended up graduating with a 3.4 GPA, which in engineering terms is actually graduating with honors. So I graduated cum laude with a 3.4 GPA. Even though in engineering, that's a good grade. Unfortunately, for medical school, a 3.4 is kind of on the low side. I did end up taking 2 years off, 2 gap years. The reason I did that was I had intentions to take the MCAT and apply for medical school in 4th year of college, but the night before my MCAT, I was so anxious. I got like no sleep whatsoever. And the next day I was dead tired, but I still sat and took the MCATs. And I was like, well, if my score ended up being high enough, maybe I'll consider applying. Yes, no. My score was horrible. I ended up getting a 30, and I was like, well, with my GPA and this kind of lowish score, and I really didn't do much research or too many extracurriculars in college. So I felt like if I applied now, my package to the medical schools would be a little weak. So I ended up deciding not to do it and take my 2 gap years so I can not only make my resume look a little better, it was also time for me to like really finally decide if medicine's really the way to go, or if I rather do research and do a PhD, for example. So during my 2 years off, I did end up going to the NIH to do a 2-year research program. It was a very interesting experience. After that, I definitely realized that I am never going to do a PhD. I really don't like basic science research, in the sense that I felt like it's really like a lottery and how lucky you are, because if experiment just doesn't go right, no matter how well thought it is, you still don't have a project. The other thing I really didn't like about PhDs is the fun things about research I like was like the hands-on aspect of it. But when you become a PhD and you're the PI of your own lab, you really don't do any of the like hands-on research anymore. You kind of just sit in your desk and write lots of grants and go over other people's research and like write papers and things. And that was, well, something I wasn't really into. Those 2 years definitely told me I was not cut out to be a PhD, and I didn't want to do basic science research. And I did volunteer at like hospitals and emergency rooms. It was nice seeing how doctors like interact with their patients and, was able to treat them and all of that. So I really thought when I applied to med school that I wanted to be a family med physician, because I really enjoyed the teaching aspect of being a doctor. I enjoyed the idea that, your family med physician will interact with, basically the general public, because everyone needs to go see a general practice doctor. That's time when they educate the patients on like how to take care of your body, how to take care of your health, what good foods to eat, how to lose weight, or any of the very basic common health concerns that we all have. And I thought that patient education was really going to be my strong suit, because I really do like education as a whole. In college, I really liked being a TA. I felt like I liked sharing the knowledge and the process in which I come to my own understanding. So that's what I did. That's how I applied to med school. For my AMCAS application, I did end up applying to medical school with a 3.4 GPA, which is about, I think, a little below the mean in terms of people who got into medical school that year, for which was what, oh my gosh, so long ago, 2013. So I was the entering class of 2013. 3.4 was on the low side because the mean GPA was 3.66. I did end up taking my MCATs again, and I got a 34, which in modern time translates to about, I think, a 94th percentile. I think that translates to roughly 516 in like modern MCAT scoring. So I applied with 34 on my MCAT, 3.4 GPA. I also applied with 2 years of translational science research, and I also had maybe almost 100 hours of hospital volunteering underneath me. So that was roughly what my AMCAS application was like. I was able to describe for my personal essay. It was very generic. Honestly, my personal essay was not that great. But lo and behold, my package managed to get me 6 medical school interviews. I got 2 acceptances, and I ended up going to Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. It's considered in-state, so my tuition and all of that was a little lower. In retrospect, that was probably one of the best decisions that I made, because my husband, he actually went to Georgetown Medical School. And because that's a private medical school, the amount of student loans he took out is basically doubled what I had to take out. Okay, now that I'm in medical school, I would describe med school, at least in my experience, I would say it's kind of like a repeat of high school, in the sense that it felt very cliquey. So for me, that's, like I said, I felt like that was kind of a repeat of high school in that sense. In terms of the knowledge, oh my gosh, it was like cramming 4 years of undergrad classes into 2 years, because in medical school, the first 2 years is your basic science courses. It was hard. I have to say, I'm one of those people who like, oh, I did great in high school, so college can't be that hard. And I suffered because of that mentality. I didn't really pick up the pace until like reality hit me. It was like, oh my God, college is actually like, I need to put in the work. I ended up graduating college with like, oh wow, with putting some work in, it's really not that bad. So I entered medical school thinking like, oh, I already took a bunch of these courses as a prerequisite anyways, so I should be good. And once again, I got my butt handed to me. Everything was just like so fast paced, so tough that I suffered. And then reality hit me again. By my second year med school, I like really sat down and focused. I feel like this was a reoccurring trend for me. Yeah, not the best. I feel like I'd never learned my lesson, but somehow I always end up okay in the end. So yay, lucky me. Anyways, so in my first 2 years, the basic science and the studying, once I got my like study pattern down, I managed to do pretty well. And then there was the how to be a doctor courses. Those were like a struggle, because we had to learn how to do a physical exam. Then we have to like learn how to take a history and ask all the pertinent questions from patient, and be able to like come up with good ways of presenting all that information. This is all in preparation before we go into the actual hospital to do rotations in 3rd and 4th year. I realized practicing medicine is very different from the books. We learn in 1st and 2nd year all these basic information, and we learn how to take a history and do a physical in like a practice setting. But when you go onto the floors and you interact with real patients, and then you have to present to your attending, it's so stressful. The attendings and the residents on service are so busy that you feel bad as the med student if you are unable to do it properly, or you're taking too long to present. So I felt like a lot of stress in doing that. But through my rotations, I started to realize that, how I said when I first applied for medical school, I really thought that I was going to be a family med physician. After doing my rotations in like, everything, including medicine, OB-GYN, surgery, family med, I realized that I kind of didn't like that what I thought I would have liked was the patient education point. I've come to realize that I really didn't like it as much because as a naive pre-med, I thought that more patients would be like me and would willingly go to see a doctor when something's wrong and would appreciate being told how to take care of my body and my health and take medication as prescribed. And I feel like in the real world and with real patients that there are patients that we doctors think are good patients, but there are also, group that were like, oh, I just can't deal with you today. I still like the idea, but in practice, not so much anymore. I really did like surgery in the sense that, you were able to be hands-on. I also liked how short rounds were. When I say rounds, it's like, you go around talking about every patient on your service and what needs to be taken care of that day and the planning for them. But I really didn't like how intense surgery was and how intense surgeons were. Basically, I went through most of my third year knowing very little of what I want to do. So this is where introduction to pathology came. My school has this in third year like speed dating meet and greet between the medical students and the residents and fellows that were in this different subspecialty areas of medicine. It was a good time for medical students to go around and talk to residents and fellows in the subspecialty they were interested in. There was the big ones. There was like internal medicine with cardiology and GI. There was like ortho. Every subspecialty in medicine that my med school's hospital offers basically had a representation. The big ones were big. Oh, the tables at like the cardiology and the GI and the ortho and the ENT and the plastics tables were so crowded, full of med students. And like, I did one or two of those tables. I just didn't feel like I related. So I got kind of tired halfway through and I wanted to go to a more empty table. I basically went to the table where there was no other med students. That unfortunately or fortunately was the pathology table. It was basically me and another med student and 3 pathology residents, and we were chatting. They were telling me about what their pathology program is. They were telling me about how like pathology as a residency was so different from pathology in your second year med school course. I was like, oh, the stuff you're telling me is interesting because not only in pathology are you very hands-on, you also don't have to deal with the patient's social status or difficult patients in that sense because you're really only dealing with the patient's tissues and you're also constantly interacting with the patient's doctor as the intermediary. So, you get to have more educational discussions that way. It really sounded interesting and that's what piqued my interest. And I ended up doing a really brief 2-week elective in pathology in my third year. And it was basically surgical pathology. I sat in with the resident as they were signing out cases and observing them while they were grossing their specimens. And honestly, I was like, wow, this is actually pretty interesting. Everyone, like the environment and the way people interacted, it was more like my speed. So I was like, okay, this might actually be it. In fourth year, I made sure to do a full 1-month rotation and also found a away rotation in Chicago. And after these 2 months, I was like, yeah, pathology for sure is it, which was great because it was time for ERAS and I had to apply to somewhere, and I'm so glad I found pathology. I was actually getting very disheartened going through third year medical school because I had this like dream idea of what medicine was going to be like, and it kind of fell through and it didn't end up being like that, and I was really starting regretting going into medicine. But lucky for me, I did end up finding pathology, though I have to say there are definitely doctors out there and residents out there who went through the whole process and got disheartened and no longer is interested in medicine, but they're kind of stuck. Not only because, well, they already put so much time and commitment into it, they also have all of those med school loans that they have to pay back. So I'm glad that even though I did get stuck, I did find a way out of my rut, and hence, I'm in pathology. So I'll just briefly talk about my ERAS application like I did with my AMCAS application. My step 1 score was a 231 and my step 2 score was a 235. So like about average. During my time in med school, I didn't really do any research whatsoever. I basically just did the like the basics. Through med school, got through, do my clerkships. I high passed or honored most of my clerkships with one pass, which is in neurology. Gosh, I hate neuro. Anything neuro, like neurology, neuroscience, neuropath. Oh my, it just doesn't work with me. It doesn't click. Okay, anyways. So yeah, my application was pretty basic. I think the biggest boost for me is that pathology residency isn't that hard to get into, especially if you are a US medical graduate. So I was able, and I felt like even with my pretty basic ERAS application, I was able to have basically my top picks of where I wanted to go and which school I wanted to go to. I did do a few leadership roles, becoming the treasurer of our school's Club Med, which is basically an internal medicine interest group. So I was with them for 4 years, and then I became a leadership role. I also started my own badminton club there because I really like playing badminton and got a little funding. I set up a little court, and we had like a small group of 10 med students who were all interested in playing. So that was really cool. You probably could say this about a lot of subspecialties in medicine. In pathology, it's very broad. So I've come to realize I'm not one of those people who like everything in pathology either. And I'm so glad that I found something that I was really interested in, which was GI pathology. So now that is what I am going in about a month to start my GI pathology fellowship in California. So that's it for today. I do think in the future, I will probably want to make a video on the ERAS application system, how to apply for pathology, and what tips I have for your application and also for your interviewing. So please let me know down below if that's something you're interested in. That's it for me today. I will talk to everyone later, and everyone have a good day. Bye.